right, I'll just open up in prayer. Thank you, Father, that we can come here tonight and discuss your word, discuss your language. We just want to give you glory for your language and everything that you've given us through your word. We just want to bless you for it in the mighty name of Messiah. Amen. All right, so tonight we are on letter 19, which is the fourth last letter, which is the letter Goof. And last time we looked at the Tsadik. So the Tsadik is the one that's got the two letters there. The first one is the Tsadi on the right, and the left one is called the Tsadik Sufi. So that's when it's on the end of the word. It has a different form. It's just the way the language is, but it's got symbolism in it as well. But I'm not going to go into that tonight. So basically what we're going to discuss tonight is just a bit of background on the Hebrew language, specifically Hebrew thinking, a few interesting things there. And then I'm going to recap specifically on the letter Samech, the letter Ayin, and also the letter Tsadik, because they all flow in and is connected to the letter Goof in some way, shape, or form. And then we're going to look at the connection between the letter Goof and the letter Tsadi. And when you combine them, it makes the word Tsadik. That means holiness. And we're going to have a discussion about what holiness is and why holiness is important. Then we're going to look at the relationship between Goof and the monkey. The word Goof, if you write it out, it actually means monkey. And it's connected through a passage in the Tanakh to a peacock, to a monkey and a peacock, which is interesting because it's also symbolism found in other religions as well. So there's some significance with that. Then we're going to look at the letter Goof and the month of Adar. Now, the month of Adar is the 12th month of the year. We are currently in the month of Adar, going into the month of Nisan. And the month of Nisan is the first month of the biblical cycle. So it's not Rosh Hashanah, we go to the 7th month. This is the 12th month going to the first month. And it's all about the harvest. So we're in the 12th month, and the Goof is connected to Adar. And then we're going to look at Goof in relation to Hamas. Now, Hamas means violence. And Hamas is the opposite of what Tsadik stands for, which is righteousness. So we're going to look at those two connections. And then the ancient Goof in Aramaic means the eye of the needle. And that relates to a gateway or an entry point as defined in scripture. And then Goof in relation to the month of Adar, in relation to the feast of Purim. It's all about Esther entering before the king. So there's a theme relating to the letter Goof and entering into the presence of the king. And that's also the connection to holiness. That's a prerequisite for that to happen. Now, first of all, a bit of background on the Hebrew language. So I've got a picture there of the tapestry. That's the best way I can describe truth. Now, truth is defined with horizontal threads and vertical threads. But for truth to get its essence, you need to interweave those threads together. And those threads, every two threads that cross, creates a pixel with a color within reference to other pixels and colors. And if you put them together, you get a beautiful picture. So all the truths that you find that are horizontal intermix with the truths that are vertical, interweave with one another, create a beautiful picture that does not exist without those things interacting with one another. Horizontal strands are things that we find in the physical realm. Things we see with our eyes. We look at plants, we look at the mountains, we look at the stars, and we look at the sun, we look at cycles, and we think about those things because they come from somewhere. And there are truths revealed through just looking at nature, looking at animals, looking at behaviors, also looking at seasons, patterns, and all those things. Those are the horizontal threads. The reason they are more than one thread is that the concept of truth is defined by you need two or more witnesses to confirm one truth. Therefore, you need two or more strands to confirm the same truth. So therefore, there's multiple strands that are referencing one another and confirming each other. They harmonize. They're not contradictory to one another, even though they're not exactly the same, but they do confirm something that's close to them. Now, the Hebrew language is the same. There's an idea or a concept that's similar to some other idea that harmonizes, just give you a bigger picture or a fuller idea or understanding of something. That's how that works. Now, the vertical lines is our connection to the unseen. Now, how a vertical strands start to develop is if you take two thoughts and you put them next to each other. That's the concept of black fire and white fire. Black fire is the letters, and white fire is the space in between. And if you took those two letters or two words and you meditate upon them, one in relation to another, there's now a link or a connection. Now that connection is similar to looking at two pictures that are slightly different. And if you put 3D glasses on, there will be a 3D picture popping up that did not exist on its own. And that's a horizontal strand, making a connection to something that is unseen that is now being revealed by looking at it in a certain way in relation to something else that's very similar. Now, the more of the horizontal strands you collect and you interweave them with the vertical strands that you receive through this insight or revelation by meditating on the things that we see in the physical, we start to develop this beautiful picture as this tapestry unfolds and being interweaved. Now, what's interesting about the concept of interweaving something, that's also the Hebrew word Levi. And the Levites were the priesthood or the facilitators. So they facilitated horizontally to people, and they also facilitated vertically to make a connection and to teach people the wisdom that they receive.
So what's the interweaving relationship of Levi?
Levi means interweave. That's the meaning of the word Levi. So that means that there are people anointed or have the ability to facilitate this process of connecting the strands and interweaving them and revealing the pictures of the unseen that's not previously known, but it do exist. They just have the skill to do it. Now, what I try to do in the Hebrew study, specifically around the alphabet, is to reveal the tools in order so you can also understand, but not only that, also have the ability to start weaving yourself if you apply these techniques to scripture and to the language. Now, Hebrew is the only language that I know of that got this ability. And the reason is because the fact that it's a picture language. A picture language normally have a story with a backdrop, and it's got a storyline connected to another story. And what's also interesting about Hebrew is any historical event connected to the Jewish people specifically is also a pattern that exists somewhere previously, and that will happen again. It's like the waves of the sea. You get a couple of small waves, they all look the same, and then you get the big one, the real. And that's the concept of prophetic pictures or prophetic patterns. For example, you get Sodom and Gomorrah, and then later on in history you get Pompeii, which is a similar event. And there's a future application of that that is also prophesied. So you get these prophetic pictures and patterns that's embedded within the stories that's also connected to one another throughout history. And that's also the way the language work and the stories within the scriptures. Now, the other thing about the alphabet is every single letter's got a picture, every picture's got a meaning, and every letter's got a number, and every number's got a meaning, and words adding up to the same total link to words adding up to the same total that are different. So you can connect those thoughts together, meditate upon them, and then a little strand will connect. Now, our brains work the same. It's called K-lines, or where one neuron connects to another neuron. Is it neurons? What? K-line? That's just K and then line. Uh-huh. So that's where your neuron connections connect. So the more you hear the same thing, the more you think about the same thing, the more you study the same thing, or the more you practice something, those lines become stronger. In the same way, when you take two different things, you meditate upon them in relation to one another, there's a K-line forming, or a little connection, which is wisdom that did not exist before, up to the point where you brought these two things before you and think upon them. And if you bring something else in there and it confirms that, then there's a stronger connection. So the way truth works, it will either break down the connections that already exist in your mind, that is not confirmed, and it will strengthen those things that are really true, that will now be confirmed with these new things you bring into play. So the truth has the ability to defend itself and stand on its own legs. You don't have to defend it. All you have to do is to discover it, and it will be continually be confirmed. And so you get the multiple strands, horizontally and vertically, and you'll get the fuller picture as you piece these things together. One of the other things that is connected to truth is righteousness. Now, righteousness is just the concept of to know what is right and to do what is right. So if you know what is right, I need to drive 60 kilometers in town, and I do that, I am righteous. If you breach that and you become unrighteous, you are endangering yourself. You might get hurt, get an accident, or get a fine. So the concept of steering towards righteousness is a safe place that provides protection. It's not something that people do because they want to be better than other people. It's just the safe thing to do. In order to eat healthy is righteous. To eat unhealthy is unrighteous, because you do a bad thing to yourself or to your body. And that is in relation or connected to the concept of sin. Now, this is an interesting concept. The word sin in Hebrew means to miss the mark. So you can sin on various levels. You can sin against yourself, you can sin against animals, you can sin against nature, you can sin against other people, you can sin against God. So it is just to miss the mark. So what is the mark? That is where truth comes in. Truth reveals where the mark is, what to aim at. And if you hit the mark, then you are righteous. If you miss the mark, you put yourself in danger because you are being reckless and going astray into an area where you might get hurt. So it's beneficial for us to seek truth, to find the marks we need to hit, because it's for our own growth and protection. Now, the growth we want to see is we want to grow vertically. If you grow horizontally, you will be overweight. So we don't want to do that. We want to grow and have insight into the unseen things that are unknown to us, and that are the spiritual wisdom or the gems that is hidden, and you have to seek them. They won't come to you. You have to put time in and think about these things in order to receive that. And that is basically why the Hebrew language and studying this is so crucial in order to receive those things. So it improves you, it makes you a better person, and it helps you to grow spiritually, or to grow into enlightenment, or what I call elevation. It elevates you. Now, the concept of those three things together, I'm just going to jump to the previous slide. I've got a picture here of steps. Now, to be elevated is to go from a lower entity to a higher entity. Now, I call it the lowest state is the world of duality. That's a physical realm that we live in. The highest state we want to achieve is the world of unity, where everything is one, where everything is connected to everything else. The world of duality consists of opposites. We have north, south, hot, cold, light, darkness, positive, negative. All these forces exist. And the negative or the cold or the dark is not necessarily evil. It's just the opposing force that exists so that an energy field can exist that will sustain life. Without the opposites, life cannot exist. And that is what the physical realm is. It's the world of duality. Now, the world of duality is signified by the letter Tet. So when we did the letter Tet, we discovered that insight. Now, the world of duality has got a lot of things to offer regarding truth, or those horizontal strands that we need to seek. So if you find truth and you apply it, it gives you the concept of being faithful, because applying something to your life, you believe that it's beneficial, now you do it, and now you are faithful in doing it. And once you become faithful in doing something, it declares you righteous because you found something that is right or true, you apply it, and it's, so to speak, lifting your level of righteousness. You now are a higher being than someone that's feral, or someone that's, not, that's a mess, that's not sorted out. So you've learned a few things to avoid in order to raise your quality of life. And if you receive more truth, your righteousness level or your state will increase. Now, with righteousness, and that's also what we're going to discover tonight, is the link between righteousness and holiness, and what holiness means. Now, holiness is the word Kodesh, and that starts with the letter Goof. That's why we're going to look at that. So that's that word there. Goof, Dalet, Shin. That's Kodesh, holiness. Now, holiness just means to be set apart, to be different. If everybody is like this and I'm different, I am set apart. And when they see you, they will say, you're not like one of us. You are different. And that's basically what holy means. And we want to be different because the majority of people are messed up in this world currently. And we want to elevate above that, not because we want to be better, not because we're prideful, but just because we want to raise our state of living, or a higher state of living. And that's the connection between that. So what we have is faith. That's the energy you put in. And also the energy of looking for truth. But sometimes you'll stumble upon truth. And if you see it's truth you apply to your life, then you have the opportunity to elevate yourself. So that's the relationship between those ideas. I think I've covered all of this. Now, just recapping on the previous three letters. So the Samech looks like a little circle. It looks like a wheel. Now, the idea is on the bottom right is a spiral. That spiral from the top down, from the higher level down to the lower level. And the symbolism of this spiral is found in scripture in Numbers 21:8, where the word nas is first found. Now, nas is the word that is made up of the two consecutive letters in the alphabet, the nun and the samech. Now, the nun and the samech making this word nas, that means flag, banner, or sign, or something lifted up. And Moshe lifted up the stick with a serpent that was spiraled around this stick. And till today, it is the sign for the medical institution. So that sign is still evident, and it is the sign of healing. So this spiral coming down from the top to the bottom is also the ascending spiral that contains the energy that has the ability to uplift people. So if you're sick, you will be uplifted and you'll receive healing. And if you engage with that force coming down, it will affect you in a positive way. So our goal is to seek that spiral force and to engage with it. Now, the hint that we have is that this letter Samech looks like another letter in the alphabet, which is the letter Mem, specifically the Mem Sufit, which is an enclosed Mem. The open Mem is the one just next to the Nun. You'll see it's got a little hole there on the left bottom. Now, the Mem represent words, the medium of words, and it also represents the medium of water. And the reason it's connected to water is because the Hebrew for water is mayim. It's got two mems, similar to this. The one is the open mem, and then a yod, and then an enclosed mem. And that means that the open mem is revealed knowledge, and the enclosed mem is hidden knowledge. So what we want to discover in our journey is to search in the revealed knowledge to discover the concealed knowledge, that horizontal strands, and to connect the two in order to see those pixels. That's the way a TV screen works as well. If you switch on light into a matrix, it makes a little pixel with a color or a light. And if you have that oscillating at a very fast rate, it will create this beautiful picture that got a message or a picture in it. And so in the same way, we need to have the fullness of that interaction with the mem. So that connects the mem with the samech, or with the spiral force. So the cycle of the force coming down is in the medium of words. That is the medium the Creator decided to make contact with humans, the medium of words. And this medium is in the form of a cycle. And the Jewish brothers know that that's where the concept of a Torah cycle comes from. When you study the words in a rotating sequence throughout the year, every year in, year out, even though it's the same information, it's foundational, because the foundation you lay this year, next year, going through the same thing, will build upon that foundation and elevate you, and you'll get revealed knowledge that's foundational and built upon the revealed knowledge. So it's, yeah, it's like climbing those steps. And the foundation that's laid is the open mem. And once you engage with the samech or the cycle, you'll get the revealed or the hidden knowledge revealed to you that will elevate you. So you get another level of truth, another level of righteousness, and it raises your concept of holiness. So now you look even more different, because you're no longer embedded in this world. You're starting to elevate and be different. So that's the concept of this rotating force and the samech. So I've got a picture here that gives you an idea of, or what I try to depict here is how to make a picture that depicts this. So within this, you see the spiral at the bottom, that's the letter Samech, that's spin down into the physical. And then I have the letter Ayin. Now the word Ayin means eye as well as fountain. Now an eye see outwards, but a fountain is something that brings something from another medium into your presence. For example, a water spring, or a fountain of light. It can be light shining through. Now in this case, it is the lens of the eye where the fountain flows inwards into your mind and reveal whatever's on the outside in the physical through the medium of light into your mind. In the same way, the concept of the Ayin take the medium of words, and whatever is revealed from a higher level flow into your mind and then change your mind accordingly. So you see that the words or sound and light has got similar function. Now we're going to look at another slide where we can see, connecting to letter Goof, that is actually the same idea. Now this fountain, or the Ayin, is like a lens, and it's also got the purpose during creation, where the pure light, which is Or, which is Aleph Vav Resh, that radiates from the Creator, came down through the lens of the Ayin and created a lower light that formed the basis of all matter, which is the photon, which they discovered is the building blocks of all matter. So that pure light converted into light that is now making our physical world possible. So that is the concept of the spiral flying through. So we're going to look at the same concept, but in reverse. And that's where the letter Goof comes in. How to access the spiritual through the same lens from the physical upwards. And that's the revelation of the Goof. So we're going to look at that in a moment. Further to recap, the letter Tsadik. Now this is not a boat, it's a cliff. Now the letter Tsadik in relation to the Goof, if you read it from left to right, so that's why I break all the grammar rules of Hebrew, because I look at patterns. I look at the sequence of the alphabet, and I take two consecutive letters. I read them from this side and that side. And then you take those two ideas and you meditate upon both of them, because that's the white fire in between those two letters, either way. And you need to be open enough to allow that in order to get the fullness of what's being revealed. So what's being revealed between the Kuf and the Ayin, if you read it from left to right, is the word katz, which means edge, border, or end. So when we go through the alphabet, you start with the aleph, you move towards the taf. There are 22 steps or 22 letters. And when you reach the Tsadik and you want to go to the Kuf, you'll see that there is an edge or a border or a barrier or an end. So that's what this glyph represents. The Tsadik is the number 90, and we are going to the letter Kuf, that's 100. So we are moving to a higher number type as well. So it's like the Kuf is elevating us to a next level, but there's a border there. We need to overcome that in order to step up to that next level. That's what that means. But there is a definite edge and a definite border. What's also interesting is when you look at the words that remains, if you take the Kuf out of the equation and you look at the Resh, Shin, Taf, those three letters at the bottom makes the word Reseth, that means net. So when you stand at the Tsadik, you're facing the Kuf, you know there's a border and edge. You won't necessarily jump unless you know there's a net below. So the net gives you comfort to take that step of elevation. So it safeguards you or give you that comfort. You don't have to worry, even if you don't trust, the net will catch you. So it encourages you to take that step. And that's what those last three letters reveal to us. What's also interesting is that Katz, which is Kuf Tsadik read from left to right, is found two places in Genesis. Genesis 4:3, it talks about the season that came to an end, and Genesis 6:13 talks about the end of all flesh, where the earth was filled with Hamas. Now, Hamas means violence. So that brings us to the next slide. Now, in this sense, we come to an end or a border, and we see exponentially the increasing of Hamas. And the reason I say exponentially is because this is in relation to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where the evil cried out to heaven, and that got God's attention. And then he came down himself to come and sort it out. So the evil is triggering that level, and then there will be a response to that. So Hamas, as I said, is the opposite of righteousness. Now, Hamas means violence, wrong, unjust gain, cruel or cruelty, damage, anything that's false or lies, injustice, oppressor, and also unrighteous. So it's absolutely the opposite of Tsadik, which is the previous letter. So it is as if you are wanting to take the next step to a higher level, but as you try, this Hamas is pulling you back. And the more you try, the more it increases to try and pull you back. So it's like a force, a negative force, and that's where that word opposer comes from. Now, opposer in Hebrew is the word Hasatan, which is the opposer. That's where the concept of Satan comes from. It's a force that will try you not to go to the next level, that will hold you back. That opposing force can be fear, it can be doubt, it can be physical limitations, whatever that opposing force is, it does not want you to take that next step. And that force is working within you, pulling you back. So you need to overcome the Hamas within you in order to go to the next level.
Excuse me, can I ask you something?
Yeah.
The, Hamas, is that a similar word to Hametz, like in Passover?
I don't know.
Oh, because
Yeah.
it sounds like the concept is similar, something that is not appropriate
Yeah,
for the
no,
celebration.
it's definitely related.
Passover.
It's,
Hamas and
yeah.
Chametz.
Hamas is also the modern day Hamas that want to destroy Israel.
Spelled the same.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's why I say it's a prophetic picture. We had that opposing force in the past, and even today we have Hamas. That's that opposing force in our midst today. So the same patterns continue. If you want to steer away from Hamas, Hamas is our enemy that wants to hold us back. Tsadik, or righteousness, is the way to take the step to be elevated, to go to the next level, to move away from this fallen, broken state that I found myself in. If your life is a mess and it's not sorted out, it's because you've got a lot of Hamas within your life. In order to stand up and move away from it, you have to overcome that oppressor. And the only way to get victory over that is through the Tsadik. And Tsadik, which is righteousness, is linked to the truth. You need to seek the truths that will give you the confidence and the ability and the wisdom to step out of that bondage of Hamas. As I said, it's connected to Sodom, Gomorrah, as well as Pompeii, where Hamas was escalating, and it brought down something to restore the balance. For example, if you disturb anything in nature, nature will react in a very forceful way to bring balance back again. In the same way, if you disturb imbalance, and bring imbalance into the spiritual will react to bring the balance back. And that's where Hamas is. If Hamas increases, there will be a reaction to bring Hamas down, to bring the balance back. And that's where the concept of the destruction of Hamas that is in the people will result in the destruction of the people if they do not get out of Hamas. There was only Lot and his family, excluding his wife, who got out of Hamas. All the other people were saturated with Hamas and they were destroyed with Hamas because they triggered that imbalance and the reaction came and the balance was restored in the sense of what we know as destruction or judgment. So it's like a spiritual law. If you jump off a building and you say, "I'll rebel against gravity," that's very stupid. You do violence against yourself, and that will be rewarded with destruction because you are breaching that balance if you do that. So it's foolishness to go against what is right deliberately because you are causing your own destruction. There's actually a verse that says that if you do wrong, you do violence to your own soul. If you do wrong to someone else, you're not doing it against the person, you do violence against yourself. And you're actually destroying yourself. So this is the concept of the elevation that's revealed within the Aleph Bet. So that's just the concept. If you just look at the numbers, Aleph to Tet is 1 to 9. Yod, which is the next level, is 10 to Tsadik, which is 90. So you get double digit, yeah? So it's a higher level. And then Goof is 100 to Taf, which is 400. That's triple digits. So you go from 1 to 2 and then to 3, which are the 3 levels depicted. Now the first level, as I said, represent the world of duality, and that's represented by the letter Tet and the revelation of Tet. So from the Aleph to the Tet is basically what creation is to set the foundation, to set up the forces, nature, scientific laws, everything is in place. Now I can bring man into the equation. Now man can exist within this world. Now we exist between the Yod and the Tsadik. So that's where we find ourselves currently. And it's the normal world that we try to achieve the last part of it, which is Tsadik, which is righteousness. Because between the Tsadik and the Goof, there's a border, there's an end, and there's an exponential increase of Hamas, which will want to try to stop us to go to the next level. Now, the next level of the Goof, that's what tonight's study is about. What does that mean? What can we expect if we access the Goof and overcome the Hamas that's holding ourselves back? So let's start that study. So Goof, I've just got a picture here of a gate or a gateway, because that's the main meaning of the letter Goof, is a gateway to enter into the next level. The key to that is the letter Goof. Now, before we get into the good stuff, let's look at the monkey. Goof is the 19th letter if you count from the Aleph. It's the 4th letter if you count from the Taf. And it's connected to the letter Dalet, which is the 4th letter if you count from the Aleph. And by doing that, you can connect the Dalet and the Goof. Now, this is a concept of Hebrew thinking. Just through the sequence, looking at the pattern, I can connect two letters that's in balance within the sequence. And if I take those two letters, I can make a word. And that word has meaning that support the Goof as well as the Dalet. I can also connect the meaning of the Dalet to the letter Goof to give it the additional secondary meaning. Now, Dalet means door. It's an opening, it's a doorway. Therefore, Goof is also opening a doorway just because of its position within the alphabet and their connection. Where is it? If you connect the Goof and the Dalet, it makes the word Kadat. It's got a double Dalet, but the concept of connecting the two is Kadat, that means to bow the head or to bow down. That's a symbol of humility, respect, and repentance. And that is what is required to enter the gateway. To enter the next step, you can only access that through humility, through respect, and through repentance. And that's the wisdom between those two letters.
Between
the Dalet,
the Dalet,
which is the 4th letter, and the Goof, which is the 4th last letter. Now, the Goof also corresponds with the month of Adar. And the month of Adar, which is the 12th month in the culture, it is the talent of laughter. So it's a time of rejoicing. It's the end of the year. That's what we know as New Year's Eve. You celebrate the end of the year and the start of the new year. That's what the month of Adar represent. And looking at the Goof and the Tsadik from the previous study, Tsadik is 90, Goof is 100, Abraham was 100, Sarah was 90. So Abraham represents the Goof, Sarah represents the Tsadik, and when they connect at those ages, they brought forth Isaac, which was laughter, that confirms the month of Adar that corresponds with the Goof. So now we have a second strand that confirms the same concept of laughter from another angle, just looking at numbers. So the Goof has to do with entering the next level, and it's a time of joy because you have broken loose from Hamas. It's an improvement, and you need to access that through humility. It's bowing, respect, and repentance. So you repent from your previous Hamas that you allowed, and that allows you to enter the next step. Now that concept is also found in Proverbs 31, where it talks about the woman, which says she laughs awaiting the final days, and that corresponds with the final days of the month of Adar. Which is also interesting, is another layer or another strand that connects to the month of Adar, and that's the season of the Feast of Purim, which is quite frankly this month. They celebrated Purim, I think, was it 2 weeks ago? I think. So we're currently in the month of Adar. That's quite a coincidence. We're looking at the Goof in the month of Adar. They celebrated Purim just a while back. And the Feast of Purim is about Esther going before the king, bowing her head in humility to intercede for the Jews who received the death penalty, which is Hamas. So they were in a time of Hamas. She was a righteous woman, a Tsadik. She took the step in faith, in humility, interceded, and overcame, and the outcome was laughter and joy, which resulted in the feast. So now we also see the concept or the theme of the letter Goof. So the bowing of the head is humility before an higher entity in the form of a king. So I enter the presence of a king, and I enter it with humility, with a heart of intercession for the benefit of the people who are still entangled within Hamas. And I have just stepped out of it, and I do it for their benefit. So it's a selfless act of faith, and also one of someone who is a hero. So it's not someone who's, just rolling over and hope for the best. It's someone who does something about the situation. And that is what the Feast of Purim is about. And stepping up to the next level, as I said, going to this next level. So this third level is the presence of the King. That's what is revealed through that. It's a step of faith. It's unknown. We don't know what's beyond there, but we can safely take the step because there's a net below. So if you don't know what's on the other side, it encourages you to take that step. But once you take the step, you realize that it is entering the presence of a king or being elevated to that level. That's what it's about. We're going to look at the word Isaac or Yitzchak. It's Yod, Tsadik, Chet, Kuf. We see the Tsadik and the Kuf in his name as well. The same way we see the Tsadik and the Kuf in the transition. So his name contains those two letters which depicts the transition as well. And the two letters that are left is the Yod and the Chet. If you connect the Yod and the Chet, what word do you get? Chai. That means life. And that's why there's laughter, because he entered life. Chamas represents death. You step into life by going from the Tsadik to the Kuf, which is a 90 and 100, which is his parents. It's all strands that just harmonize. You just harmonize. There's no way you can see that it is not so, because it just keep on confirming the same thing, even though it's slightly different, different storyline, but it just confirms the same thing over and over again. And that's how the Hebrew language works. We just keep on harmonizing these pictures. And what we can take from this is the wisdom. For my life now, I need to steer away from Hamas around me. I need to sort out the Hamas in me. I need to learn truth to find out what righteousness is, because that's the key to step away and out of those things. And I know that I will, with confidence, be elevated to a high level by doing that. And I will be rewarded with joy, laughter, and life, as we see through those things we just looked at. I already said everything on this slide. So that's Esther entering the king. Oh, the other thing is that Esther was an intercessor. The same pattern existed in the time of Abraham or Avraham. There was a time of Hamas in the time of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham interceded for those people as well, just like Esther interceded for the people. And Moses was also intercessor in his day. The children of Israel did unrighteous things, and there were Hamas around them or within them, and the Almighty wanted to destroy them, and Moses interceded, and they were spared. So we see the concept of the intercessor in the midst of Hamas. So the one that is righteous is the one that's selfless, that intercedes and help those that are entangled in this destructive environment that they found themselves in. And that will lead to their elevation and the elevation of others to help them. So your faith is not for you, it's for others as well. So everything you do that is good is not only for your benefit, but for the benefit of others. And you need to try and share that hidden wisdom you receive with others to help them as well. And that's where the true joy, laughter, and life is. It feels very good if you can help someone and bring them to a next level with you than to be dragged down into the destruction with others as well. And that is what true happiness is to do that selfless act to others. All right, this is an exciting one. This is just looking again at the Hebrew letters and how they're constructed. Now, Goof being the letter that goes the lowest down the line, you can see a little tail going down. That's the tail of the monkey. And the letter that corresponds with that, just looking at the opposite, we get the lamet that reach above. So we get the letter that goes down and we get the letter that goes up. So I've got a picture here of the lamet and the kuf in relation to Jacob's ladder. So I'm just overlaying this concept with a storyline that tells a story about someone who made a connection to the unseen. And to make a connection, he was in the physical, and the unseen or high level was beyond his understanding in the spiritual. And that was depicted by a ladder. So the lamet and the kuf in relation to one another formulates that ladder, and it helps to enter into the presence of the king. If we take it into the backdrop of the story of Esther, we got the king, the presence of the king. And what's interesting is that the word presence is the word kebal, which is kaf, bet, dalet. And guess what the word bet represents? It means house. It can also mean palace. It's the house of the king. So the kuf and the lamet give access to the house of the king or the presence. And the king is in an elevated state. And how I reach that elevated state are through these two letters, the symbols of these two letters. The kuf, as I said, is the gateway connected to the dalet or the door. So that's the entry point, and it gives me access to the lamet. So what does lamet means? Lamet means teacher. It also represents the shepherd's staff. So it has to do with the sheep following a voice. Now the word voice in Hebrew is the word kol, which is kuf lamet, which are these two letters. So I've got a voice calling of a shepherd. I've got a shepherd's staff, which is the lamet. And I've got the concept of a teacher. So entering through the gateway, I access the presence of a teacher. Following the teacher will elevate me even higher into the presence of the king. So accessing the kuf is only the beginning. Then there's a lot of learning that takes place beyond that entry point to reach high level.
I've got a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
From memory, kol would be kuf, vav, lamed.
Yeah.
Kol. But that's to me spells kal, which is light.
Yeah.
Or lightness.
Now,
So
in the dictionary, what you say is correct,
yeah.
but there's also another way to spell it.
With the punctuation.
Yeah, it's either with or without the vav, and the two connect. The one without the vav, that also means light, links to sound, which is also without the vav. But you also get the one with the vav. So this is just the different ways it can be written. If it was with the vav represents the number 6. Number 6 is the number of man. So the kuf and the lamet has the man within it. So we are within that light or within that voice. That represents man following the voice or man following the light, if you insert the vav in there.
And it's also, so lamed is the way up.
Yeah.
And the kuf is the way down. So we're talking about that as Jacob's ladder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in a way, it implies that man is ascending.
Yes. And that little vav, if you insert the vav, that's the man ascending and climbing up. So it's still harmonizing. It's not taking away, it's just adding. another level, another layer.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So now we see the connection between light and sound. Now, if you look at it scientifically, light is at a higher frequency than sound. Sound is just slow down light. Someone actually took the light through a telescope of the stars. They slowed down the frequency and it made a sound, and they could listen to the star by just slowing down the frequency of the light oscillating. And that's the connection between light and sound. Light is also the concept of truth, because the definition of truth is the highest form of reality. That's what truth actually means. And in the context of reality, we can only perceive reality through our eyes that work with light. So switching on a light reveals the highest form of reality for us, because that's the medium we communicate with the physical world, is through the fountain of the eye, flowing the light into our minds to make the picture of what is on the outside. So we have the same means of receiving that. But what I said earlier is that the spiritual connect to the physical through sound, which is the medium of words. And that is where the sound comes in. And the light is on the physical, the sound is on the spiritual, or the horizontal and the vertical connections. Psalm 119 said, his word is a light unto my path. So
I'm just wondering if one has reached core, then their sound would be empowered by the presence of the king.
now remember the
Their
Lamed.
voice?
The Lamed is the teacher.
Yeah.
And it also means learning.
Yes.
So to elevate from the entry point, there's learning steps that need to happen
Yes.
before you enter. Now, if you look at the story of Esther, Esther had to prepare for 12 months before she could enter before the king. She had to prepare herself with perfumes and whatever for 6 months, and then with oils and whatever for 6 months. And that prepared her to come before the king. So that preparation of 12 months was that Lamed experience for her before she could enter. But she had access and the ability to have the opportunity, which was her cough entering in. Okay, the next one is I've overlaid this concept with another thing which is called the Tabernacle Pattern. Now, the Tabernacle Pattern has got at the back here on the top, I just have an arrow there that's elevation, so we get the same concept of a ladder, Jacob's ladder, and Goof and Lamed. We've got the Holy of Holies. That's where the highest form of holiness is, or set apartness, or hiddenness. Then we've got the holy place, and then we've got the outer court. And what we note here, there are 3 doors. We've got the main entrance to the outer court. We've got the next entrance into the holy place, and then we've got the last entrance into the Holy of Holies. So there are 3 doors or 3 steps to go to that top part, entering before the presence of the king. And those 3 doors are depicted by connecting 2 words. Connect the word Tsadik and the word Kodesh, with them sharing the letter Goof. So I've got a little block there that depict that. So we've got Tsadik, which is Tsadik, Tsadi, Resh, Yod, Goof, and we got Kodesh, Goof, Dalet, Shin. Now those 2 words connected give us 3 doors. We've got the orange 2 doors there, which are the 2 Dalets, which are depicted there, which is the holy place and the Holy of Holies, those 2 doors. And then we've got the Tsadik and the Goof itself, which are the 2 letters that we are looking at. And the 2 remaining letters, the Yod and the Shin, makes the word Ish. That means exit or entrance, which is another concept of a doorway. So we have a doorway, Ish, And also the Ish is also related to fire through the letter Shin. And the brazen altar is the place where the offering was done with fire. So that's why the first door is associated with Ish. And then you have the two Dalits. So entering into the first doorway is what the Goof represents. And we have the Hamas, the fire experience, the chaos, which is depicted by the Sodom and Gomorrah, which is depicted by that Shin. That is the symbol of fire as well. So the Hamas is at this door, and they enter in and then accessing the rest of the doors. So that's just something interesting connecting those two. Now, what I want to depict here is that you cannot take righteousness out of holiness. You can't take holiness out of righteousness. They are connected. They're always connected. The one is a result of the other. Holiness is a state. Righteousness is due to knowing and doing what is right. And if you do that, it will automatically give you another state, which is called holiness. Now, if you can depict holiness in a concept of a scientific idea called like a potential difference or voltage difference, which can create a lightning strike. At the top, we have millions and millions of volts, which is positive charged. At the bottom, we've got the ground, which is earth, which is 0 volts. Now, the potential difference between the two creates the potential of the energy that can flow down and destroy whatever's at the lowest level. So that is Hamas is at the bottom. So Hamas will be destroyed because it's the furthest away from the most positive entity, which is Holy of Holies. So for you not to be destroyed, you need to elevate your potential of holiness, and you do it through truth and righteousness. And the lesser or the further you are away from the earth or the ground, and the higher you are connected or closer you are to the higher potential, the less potential difference there is, and the smaller the little spark. And that's where the concept of if you bring an imbalance in the spiritual, it will just rectify itself and bring balance.
The less the resistance to the image.
Yeah. So the concept of holiness is to raise your potential to be as close as the highest potential there is, to have the least effect on you, because the lower you are or the furthest you are away from the high potential, the more the potential is for your destruction, which is the consequence of Hamas, because they are the furthest away. Nothing other than destruction can happen because it's like a lightning strike. It will happen because it's the furthest away. So that's just a scientific way to show how judgment works. It's just an imbalance in the spiritual and physical. Now, the interesting thing I want to share is the connection to the monkey. Now, the place where this word is found, Kuf Vav Pei, which spell the word Kuf, which means monkey, is in 1 Kings 10:22. Where it says, "For the king had at sea navy of Tarshish with the navy of Hiram, once in 3 years, come to the navy of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory, and apes and peacocks." That was fascinating to see in that verse that it has to do with apes and peacocks. Now, the context of this passage is in relation to Solomon building the temple, which is the house or the palace of the king. And that correlates with the letter Bet that we looked at. And the word Hiram, which is one of the places where the apes or the monkeys and the peacocks came from, means exaltation of life. It has to do with elevation. And Tarshish means contemplation or examination. So it's a place of decision. It's also a place where you're examined to take that next step. Level of holiness and all the connections. And then the exaltation of life takes place in relation to these two obscure ideas, which is the ape and the peacock. Now, if you just look at a peacock, it's evident that the peacock represents eyes, or the letter Ayin. So I've got the letter Ayin there. And the feathers with all the eyes on them represent the golden eyes or the stars. And it's symbols for the cosmos, or the all-seeing wisdom, immortality, and light. That's what the ancients depict the peacock and the symbolism of the eyes for. And if you read the scripture, there are 4 living creatures that's full of eyes in the scripture as well. So now we see the palace of the king, or the throne of the Almighty, and in front of his throne are these 4 living creatures, and with upon them they've got wings, and it's full of eyes, just like peacocks, that depict all-seeing wisdom and immortality and light. So where this is found is in Ezekiel 1 verse 12. It's also in Ezekiel 10 and Isaiah 6, where you get these angelic beings or cherubim, and they are part of the Elohim. Now, Elohim is plural for Eloha, that is translated as God. Elohim actually means gods. It's plural. Now, Elohim just means that it is spiritual beings that make up the council members of the king. Now, the spiritual beings have different rankings or levels, of which these 4 living beings, I think, is the closest, because they are right in front of the throne of the king. And the words they utter is Kadosh, 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 Yahweh Tzevaot. That means holy, holy, holy is the Almighty and his armies. The word Tzevaot means armies, plural.
This is the last one.
Yeah. So I've got the picture of the 4 living creatures there. One has got a face of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. And you can see their wings are full of eyes, just like the peacock. And I've placed the word Tzava on each of them, because if you have 4 Tzava, it is Tzevaot. And they cry 3 times Kadosh, which are 3 Goofs. I've made them red there. And these 3 Goofs represent the 3 gateways that we looked at entering the Holy of Holies. It's just a pattern that aligns through the number 3, the meaning of the Goof, overlay that with the Tabernacle Pattern, overlay that with the throne room, which is also the Holy of Holies. And the beings that are in front are associated with like commanding figures, commanders of armies, and they are covered with eyes. And now we've got Solomon's temple, and some of the gifts he received in the process of constructing this temple is a physical representation of what is in the spiritual. So in the physical, we have the peacock. In the spiritual, we have the Tevaot, or the 4 living creatures, with the same symbolism. And they guard the presence of the Almighty. They guard the gateway, the last gateway, the access point, the entry point. And that's where that examination takes place. So you need to be examined, just like Esther had to prepare 12 months. She was examined and said, yeah, you're good to go. You're very pretty. The king can receive you now. And then she went in and she had exaltation of life, coming before the king, bowing the head, interceding on behalf of the people because of Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
And that just overlay all the things we looked at in relation to this. So the concept of the army is also related to the destruction of Hamas. And we see that in the next picture, which is how the word Goof is constructed. Now the Goof, if you look at the letter Goof, can be constructed by the letter Kaf and the letter Zayin. It makes the same shape. Now, Zayin in the Hebrew alphabet means sword, and Kaf means hand. So we've got the sword in the hand. And that is the weapon that the armies are using, and they are the Tzadikim, the righteous, and they fight against Hamas. And that is what the Goof represent, the four living beings represent, the Peacock represent, and all the eyes. It depicts the armies of the Almighty. And the weapon, or the sword, is the weapon that is used against enemies. An arrow, we learned that 3 studies ago, is the weapon that pierces the heart, and the arrow is compared to a lightning strike, like a little lightning bolt. And it pierces the heart, and the lightning bolt represents truth. So you like a little Cupid, shooting little arrows that make people fall in love. The same concept of shooting an arrow into the heart reveals truth into your innermost being, which is your heart, and that brings insight. So that's a previous study, just the difference between the two weapons. Sword is always against the enemy. The arrow is always for the benefit of the people, to pierce their hardened hearts in order to get truth in there. So the armies are the righteous, and they make war against violence. And it's in the context of the building of the palace or the temple. We can also make a Goof when you connect a Resh and a Zayin. So it's the same concept, it's just 2 other letters that give the same idea. Now, the Resh means head and Zayin means sword. But Zayin also represents the spinal column that sends the instructions through the central nervous system to the rest of our body. So we see the Resh with the head, which is the brain or the mind, and we see the Zayin or the central nervous system that transfers the information from the mind or the brain to the rest of the body. Now what we see here is that the letter Kuf is the letter that represents righteousness and holiness. It connects to both. And you need both in order to grow into righteousness and holiness. Now the Kuf, connected to the Resh or the mind, give us the idea to renew the mind or to change the mindset, to shape the mind. And that's why I talked about the Hebrew thinking, the way of thinking about things differently in order to make connections and to interweave the truth together in order to see the insights, the unseen things that are the hidden wisdom. So that is the mind that needs to be changed. And the Zayin means sword, but it's also connected to the word of Elohim. So the word, as the central nervous system send instructions through, so does the word send instructions through to us through the medium of words. Now, to have a spine makes you physically upright. The concept of righteousness means to be upright. So without a spine, you are not righteous. You are floppy. You will just hang around like a jellyfish. So you need structure. So that's where the concept of the name Yisrael comes from, or Israel. Yisrael are combining 2 words, Yisra, that means straight or upright, and El, that means Elohim. So it's the straight ones of Elohim, or the righteous people of Elohim, the upright ones, the righteous ones. And that is, so the symbolism of the Kuf, having the spinal cord strengthened with Zayin, and having the mind thinking differently. And that makes them set apart or different to other people. So that's why Israel was always different than other nations, based on the fact that they had the upright spinal cord with the instructions and information going to their actions, their hands and their feet. So they acted differently and they thought differently.
And this is the symbolism of the fiery serpent on Moses.
Yeah, the fiery serpent is also partially connected to this through the shape of the Zion as well, which can depict that pole.
So, again, I'm having difficulty because head in Hebrew is Rosh,
Yeah.
right? So I'm not familiar with Resh.
No, Resh is the letter Resh.
Oh,
That
letter
represent
Resh
Rosh, the head.
represents the
Yeah,
head.
yeah,
Rosh.
yeah.
All right.
So the letter Resh means head,
Resh.
which is the Hebrew Rosh.
So it's,
Yeah,
okay, thanks.
yeah, yeah. That's the letter Resh that means
Okay.
head, or depicts the head actually. It's Rosh, yeah, you're right.
It stands for it.
Yeah, it's a symbolism that connects. Now the ancient Goof, and that you can see there with that second one on the left, is the ancient symbol of the circle with the line going through it. That's an old Hebrew Goof.
It's also the way you write it in
Oh, is it?
Hebrew,
Yeah,
rather than in
yeah.
that, you write it
Yeah, like that.
like that.
Yeah. So this gives us the idea of the head and the Zion, the symbolism of those two connected together, or the head or the mind and the spinal cord. That's the information center and the nervous system that transfers the information to the rest of the body that change the actions. Now your legs dictate how you walk. The Hebrew for that is halacha or halak, to walk, halacha, and halacha or your walk is the way you conduct yourself. That's your halacha. So the nervous system is influencing your walk, your halacha, the way you act and how you conduct yourself, and also direct your hands, what you create, what you do with your hands. And of course then the mind, what you think and what you allow in your mind and what you think upon. Now the letter Zion is also the number 7. Number 7 has to do with cycles, which is the weekly cycle, of which the 7th one is Kodesh, holy. So the 7th day is holy, which we get the letter Kuf again. That's again connected to the number 7 through the Zion, making up the letter Kuf, to the symbolism of the Resh and the Zion. So we see now the Kuf is connected to cycles, just like it was connected to the Samech, which is also the cycles. So now we can see that picture slowly coming together in bringing us from a physical back to the spiritual through that spiral force of the Samech, because we get the same spiral idea from the number 7 and the cycles. Now, what we also know about the Zion, it's a sword, and being the skeleton is the bone structure of man that makes them upright. Now, if you cut a bone, you'll find marrow. And marrow is what creates blood. And blood is the life of man. Without blood, there is no life. So we see that inside the support structure is the essence of life. So inside the concept of righteousness is the essence of spiritual life. So the blood, just as important the blood is for the body, that's how important righteousness is for you, spiritual body. Now the concept of the spiritual body and the physical body is, I'm just going to skip this one, skip that one, just want to jump to this slide that talks about Kuf as the monkey. Now what I want to get to is the concept of the Nefesh and the Neshama. The monkey can depict the lower part of the soul, which is the fleshly soul, which is your likes, dislikes, it's your personality, that kind of thing.
Monkey mind.
Your monkey mind, monkey see, monkey do, your habits. Part of that is the neshama, which is depicting your spiritual soul, which is this part of you that want to reach out to something higher. And these two are in conflict with one another, as depicted by the twins, Jacob and Esau. Esau was the man of the field. He was hunting in the field together. Esau made food in the house. Yet again, the house is where the presence is. So the source of his food came from the house. The source of Esau's food came from the field. The field is depicted by the world. The house is depicted by the presence of the king. So we see the difference between the neshama and the nefesh and the conflict between those. And Jacob was the one whose name was changed to Yisrael, the one who is deemed righteous. And also, parallel to that, there were other two brothers earlier on, Cain and Abel. And quite interestingly, Cain's name starts with the letter Kuf as well. It's Kuf Yod Nun. And Cain was the one who brought the offering that was rejected, and Abel brought the offering that was accepted. And quite interestingly, the word for offering is korban, that starts with the kuf again. So we see that the letter kuf now links to the two parts of the soul that's in conflict with one another. It also links to the concept of an offering that caused the conflict of the other two brothers to take place. Now, korban, if you translate that directly, it means to draw near. So the meaning of an offering was to draw near to the king or to the presence of the Almighty.
Didn't always offer sacrifice?
Yeah, that's the same concept. Sacrifice and offering, korban. The purpose of that is to draw near, to remove anything that's in between so that you can enter in. So that's again, yet again, the concept of Esther entering into the presence. Now we have something that they did that allow them to enter in. Now what we see with the korban, we have the letter kuf. Now kuf is the key or the gateway. We have the house that is beyond the gateway that you enter into. And then we have a nun. Now nun represents seed and fruitfulness or fruit. And that is what Cain offered. He offered fruit. So his offering was rejected because he did not enter the kuf. He was standing in front of the kuf. And we can see that in his name. We see the kuf with the lower end going to the physical. We see the nun with the lower leg going into the physical. So he was grounded in the physical. If we look at Abel's name, Aleph Bet Lamed, what is in Abel's name? Nothing that goes down, only the Lamed that goes up. Abel was the one who had the connection. Cain was the one who had two connections downward, and Abel had one upwards. And Abel was in the house, in the presence of the teacher, the Lamed, and the Aleph also represents the Almighty, Yod He Vav He, because Aleph consists of two yods. You see a yod above, a yod below. They're both equal to number 10, so that's 20. And we had a Vav in the middle, that's 6. And they add up to the number 26. And if you add up Yod He Vav He, it's 6, 5, 10, 5. Oh, sorry. 10, 5, 6, 5. Also add up to 26. So the number 26 connect the Aleph to the king. So we see Abel is in the presence of the king, the teacher inside the house, and Cain was at the doorway. There was a hand prompting him. That's a yod, it's a small hand, but he was holding on with that hand to his physical fruit, to something that is grounded in the physical. So he could not let go of physical things, and that let him stand in front of the kuf, and he did not enter, but Abel did. And that's why his offering was rejected.
I keep coming across things that trigger off memory of the Hebrew letters. And it looks like, for me, if you're spelling called bun, doesn't it? I mean, it's with an R there. Isn't there a resh missing? A resh missing?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So how does that work?
No, it's a typo. There should be a resh as well. Yeah.
Right, so after the kuf.
Yeah.
Kuf, resh.
Yeah.
Bet.
Yeah, so I'll fix that one up. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Because it just sort of...
It sits wrong with you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So what's the letter in the middle of the two yods in Aleph?
Oh, it's a Vav.
Vav.
And Vav is the letter with the number 6. And 6 is the number of men.
So Aleph is Yod Hey Vav Hey
Yeah.
because it adds up to the same
Number.
as Yod Hey Vav Hey.
Yeah, the Gematria links it. So that's the two thoughts that connects to that. So the word picture, if you just look at the meaning of, or the symbolism of the letters that we discovered when we look at the Kuf and the Lamed, the one reaches up, the one reaches down, and Cain had 2 letters that's grounded in the physical, and his hand was holding on to the seed, the Nun, so he couldn't let go of physical things. And Abel was in the house, in the presence of the Almighty, and learning, which is the Lamed from the teacher. So that's just why he was accepted, the other ones rejected, because Abel entered into the Kuf, and Cain stood in front of the Kuf, couldn't let go, so his Hamas was pulling him backwards. He didn't take that step. Yeah. And I skipped a slide, just want to go back. So this slide is where we go back. So the first one we looked at is the Ayin, the ore shining down, the spinning presence coming down, and the spiral force brings the presence into the physical. That's all. So the symbol of the serpent on the pole, that brings healing, or that rectify anything that is broken to elevate it. So the Ayin is the lens, or the gateway, and we are going to return back through that same gateway. So we need to engage with the cycle, which is the Samech, that's also linked to the letter Mem, which is the word and the water, which relates to the truth, which relates to those strands. You need to be interweaved so you can get the spiritual insight applied to your life, and that will elevate your righteousness and your holiness so that your potential difference can be less, so you won't be destroyed as you walk into the presence.
So what does Samech mean again?
Samech just means the spinning presence coming down, which is the concept of cycles. So we have seasons, the festival cycles, we've got the Torah cycle, we've got the weekly cycle. All cycles relates to the letter Samech. And if you engage with them, you will get the benefit of what they are purposed for. So the Kuf, if you look at this picture on the right with the ancient Kuf, we see that it is in Aramaic, the eye of the needle. Now there's a scripture that says it is easier for a thick rope to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Now the concept of a thick rope and a rich man is that a thick rope needs to be de-stranded and then put through the eye strand by strand. So he needs to rid himself from his possessions. Just like Cain needs to let go of the physical things, a rich man needs to let go from physical things in order to pass through the Kuf. So this is a picture of Cain, who did not let go of his nun, his fruitfulness, his offering, his riches. And the idea is to enter the kingdom or the presence of the king. And that happens through the eye of a needle, which is the symbolism of the ancient Kuf. So the Kuf is the gateway that gives access, as we saw with the Lamed. Then it elevates you through to the teacher, which is the preparation of Esther, and then you present before the king. So we need to engage with the Kuf in order to enter into the presence. Now the Ayin, the lens, is the fountain or the gate where the light shine from the spiritual into the physical, but that's also the eye, which is represented by the Goof, which is part of the Goof, the Ayin. So that gives us the idea that the Goof connects to the Ayin, which is the original source or gate between the spiritual and the physical.
So, a thick rope is also known as a camel. Is that?
No, it's a wrong translation.
Right.
In Aramaic, there's one letter missing. So it's not a camel, it's a thick rope.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that is just a beautiful picture to show us the same way he created shining into the physical, the same way the physical can return to the spiritual through the same gate that he created through. And the gate is represented by the Kuf. That's the access point. And the Kuf is linked to the Zayin, and the Zayin is linked to the sword that cuts into the bone. That is the source of blood. It's also the sword of the word that cuts into your innermost part. So it's like a doctor's scalpel. Whenever there's a cancerous part, cut it open, remove it. So whenever you have an issue, it can be cut open and removed, and you will heal and be rid of that Hamas inside of you. So it's dissecting every single part within your innermost being to make you pure and holy, but it goes through cutting, dissecting, taking away, and it's painful to become righteous. It's painful to get rid of those bad habits. It's painful, if you can just think of someone who's addicted to drugs and they go cold turkey, what they go through. It's the same concept of getting rid of the things that bind you, the Hamas, and it needs to be cut away. So it's not easy to walk this path of cleansing. Okay, we've looked at this one. Now the gematria of Kuf in relation to where it is situated on the alphabet. It's at the 19th letter. Now I've just separated them, made the negative ones red and the positive ones blue. Now all these words add up to the number 19. The first one is Job, that means hatred. Then Teba, that means slaughter, or the slaughter, to slay, butcher, kill. And Goda, that means the slashing place. Then Yada, that means to throw, to shoot, or to cast. Chabat, that means to beat out, to beat off, and to thresh. It's like a threshing floor where separation takes place. And Abui, that means woe, which is the exclamation of pain. Then the positive ones, so these ones are connected to Hamas and violence and the sword and destroying the enemies and all of that. The positive ones are Batach, that means security, trust, and faith. Hidai, that means rejoicing before the Almighty. Then Chava, that means to life, living, and it's also translated as Eve, but the right word is Chava, and it also means to declare and make known, which has to do with revelation or insight. Then Chatab, that means to cut or to gather. Together has to do with second last one, which is Ehud, that is united, which is similar to Echad, which means unity. And what I said in the beginning, world of duality, world of unity. So we see that the entering before the king has to do with being unified, and the Hamas is to be separated. Then Achi, that means my brother. Yehud, that means beauty, and that's also to do with Esther preparing. Ehud, united or unity. And Joab, that means Hashem is his father. So all of this has to do with entering before the king, and the others has to do with the separation, which has to do with Hamas. And it's all related to Kuf and the things we looked at. Now this is the last slide. I just made a summary, just overlaying a lot of things which we looked at. So at the bottom here we see the world of duality, which is creation, which is the first level, the Aleph to the Tet, which is number 1 to 9. And then we have the next level, the Yod to the Tsadi, which is the physical world, which is level 2, where we exist and go towards righteousness, which is Tsadik. And Tsadik is spelled Tsadik Dalet Yod Goof, and that is the righteousness. And then we get to the transition between the Tsadik and the Goof from level 2 to level 3. And we have this gate, which is depicted by the Goof, where we have on the one side Hamas and on the other side Kodesh. And that's the transition, moving from one level to another, entering the house, which is the letter Bet of the king, which is the third level, which is the spiritual level. And the spiritual level is the higher world of unity. And we need to be elevated from where we are now in order to come before the king. The means is the eye of the needle, where there's Ayin, and this is the letter Goof, which elevates us. We had the two concepts of Hiram, that means exalted of life, exaltation of life, and Tarshish, which means examination, which has to do with the Tsadik or righteousness. We had the intercessors, which is Esther, Avram, Moses, and the concept of Mashiach, that's the anointed ones interceding, being advocates during the time of Hamas, and they are the Tzadikim that help people to become Kodesh, or holy, to raise their potential in order to come before the king. And then we have Emet here at the back, which are the interweave truths, the horizontal truths, which are the physical truths, and the revealed truths, which are the wisdom that come to life as we study the horizontal truths. And interweaving those ideas, we get the pixels that make the picture, that give us insight in order to attain that level of truth and that level of righteousness, so we can understand how to enter before the king. Mm-hmm. So that concludes the study of the Goof. So are there any questions or comments?
Through and Hamas.
Yeah.
So with the integrity of the we and apprehending enough horizontal lines,
yeah,
and therefore apprehending enough vertical lines and having strong enough fabric,
yeah,
then that allows you to pass through the gateway.
Yeah. So it's about the understanding. Applied wisdom gives you understanding. Truth gives you wisdom. If you apply truth, it gives you the application thereof, which is wisdom. And the more you do wise things, the more you understand them. So understanding is the goal. So you need to apply truth practically in order to understand it. It's like reading about bungee jumping. You can read everything you like about everybody's experience. Unless you do it yourself, you will not have the full insight of what it's about unless you experience it yourself. So it's not only good to study things, it's good to do things and experience things to get the full understanding thereof. And that's the ultimate truth, is applied truth and gaining the understanding. And then you can teach that understanding in the form of wisdom to others. And once they take that wisdom to a practical sense, that then they will understand as well. So it's all about that learning. First you crawl, and you walk, and then you run. You need to go through those phases. And that's what life is about. It's about learning things, doing things, and then starting to excel in them, and then teach others for their benefit as well. So it's selfless. It's always selfless. It's not about us. It's about other people at the end of the day. Yeah. So there's a lot of lessons we can learn that you can apply to your life. And if you do good to other people for their benefit, it will elevate you. You'll be happy. They've done a study and they saw that, learned that True happiness comes when you do good to other people. That's when you are happy. So it's all about giving at the end of the day. Yeah. Any comments there on the other side?
Hello, Philip. David here.
Hi, David.
Shalom. I find it very interesting. You pronounce it Hamas, is it? The Chamas, Hamas, and it looks very similar to the word Chavah. Is that Hava? You've got the central. It looks like you've got opposite meanings, but the construction of the words are very similar. So you've got the CHA and the CHA both starting, but then the middle consonant changes, then it goes back to the A again.
Yeah.
Is that, did you notice that? Is there anything significant in that? How it's you got similar letters at the start and the end, and then in the middle you've got the consonant with the two A's on either side. Did you notice that? Is there anything significant about that?
No, I haven't thought about that one. Yeah, that's worth thinking about. There might be something interesting there.
I just noticed words that look like that because they have the same form as Abba. They read the same. It's like they've got the two A's on either side of the consonant, and they've got the same look. They both start with the same. Anyway, it's just something that I was wondering if there was anything else in those words that very similar. How they similar construction, but just with a couple of differences. They switch between a negative negative meaning and a positive meaning.
Yeah. Anybody want to comment?
So that's one thing. And also, when you say Tsadik, so that refers to one who is righteous, and righteousness is tzadkut.
Oh, it's tzadkut.
The word for righteousness is tzadkut, as far as I'm concerned. But so, I mean, sometimes, like, I know it can be, it just feels a bit pedantic in a way, but there's you know, like a transposition of the letters can mean so much. And the relationship means something. So, and you're giving us a lot of detail about how they relate.
They connect,
and how they connect. So I'm just wondering, like, it comes up a few times. And probably will keep coming up.
No,
so,
it's really good that you bring that, because as I said, I'm not a Hebrew speaker, so I don't know how to pronounce these words correctly.
And mine is like, it's basic, but it's from childhood, so I suppose it's stuck in there, and, and it comes up in this context, and it's refreshing to sort of see all this. And, so it's
as I said earlier on, I break all the rules because I look at patterns.
And it's
because there's so much wisdom interweave within them. And I think it will be difficult for someone who is grammarly 100%. They will probably not dare to go where I go because they will break rules.
You're doing Hebrew jazz.
Yeah, so I improvise. I just do things outside of the box and go where no Hebrew man has gone before.
Amen.
Hello?
Philip, there's a query about the word Hamas. Is that the same word that's being used in the Middle East now with the regarding the fighting, Hamas?
Yeah,
the
that's
military organization, Hamas?
Yeah, that's the same concept. Yep.
Different spelling.
Yeah, that's it's in the sound. It's similar. Yeah,
like the shock and awe campaign.
It's exactly
in the
the
Gulf
same
War.
sound.
yeah, it's the same sound, so you can definitely make that connection. Sound of
Well, it also it was interesting for me to hear the way you're talking Hamas and Chametz. Pesach is coming up. And it's Chametz is something that is not appropriate or is would be out of place for the celebration of the Passover.
So Ross, how did you find it? Oh, it's
Yeah,
not system overload.
No, I mean a lot of information, but a lot of it just kind of went in. There was also a lot of connections made.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's good that you have some background. A lot of people who don't have some background, they just go over the head. They struggle to understand or just grasp the basics. So, well done.
Yeah, it's definitely sparked wanting to
Yeah,
about
yeah.
words.
I can't wait to go into the next letter to see what I can find there. Yeah. And I thought, Goof is a very dry letter. If you read about it, there's not much written about it. So it was really a struggle to dissect everything. And I haven't done all the different things that can be done to it. I haven't looked at the gematria of 100, which is the number for Goof. So there's some meanings there as well. Yeah, so there's some other nuances that could have, I think it will just emphasize what's already there. The main topic, I think, is to be elevated, to be humble, and to break loose from the Hamas of this world. I think that's the main message. Basically, to become a better person. And the ability to do that. And you can do that with confidence because there's a net below. Even though we don't know everything, just take that step. You'll be all right. So, yeah.
Philip, another thing I found interesting was you talk about Esther, Abraham, and Moses.
Yeah.
Each one, Esther interceded in the Jews' time of trouble, and Abraham interceded before Sodom and Gomorrah, and Moses interceded with Israel. Each one of them interceded before some form of destruction or potential destruction in a time of crisis or time of trouble. So, could we extend that into the future with the final time of trouble before the second Messiah? That those who are alive, the 144,000, so to speak, they too will have the same role of interceding on behalf of those who are about to be destroyed.
You will always get intercessors because that's what the concept of grace is about. In a time of trouble, there will always be someone that will intercede during that time. And that the concept of salvation is always, you need to be saved in a time of trouble. Salvation is not required when everything is peaceful. You only need it in a time of Hamas. And that's where these ideas come in. Where we can expect some action when things start to exponentially just go out of whack. All right, so let's close in prayer and then we can send you guys off. Thank you, Father, for this wonderful opportunity to meet and discuss your word. We just give you the glory. We ask you to be with us so we can be elevated and get rid of the Hamas in our lives. I ask it in the mighty name of Messiah. Amen.